Glorious devotees, thank you so much for attending another presentation on Srila Jiva Goswami's Krishna Sandarbha. We are reviewing the Paribhasa Sutra at the beginning of his Krishna Sandarbha. And today we will be discussing a specific pastime wherein application of the Paribhasa Sutra is properly provided by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Anuchedas. Again, this is all in support of the Paribhasa Sutra, these few classes here. And then after he's completely supported it, Jiva Goswami is now proceeding to show its application and how it should be utilized when one is studying specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, today's class, he'll begin with a narration from the Srimad Bhagavatam and then expand on that as it appears in other Puranas and show the proper application of the Paribhasa Sutra there. So again, just so we completely understand, Jiva Goswami is pounding the post. He is making sure that we, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who are the audience of the Sandarbhas, which he made clear at the very beginning of the treatise, that this is for those who are in pursuit of Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna as their ultimate attainment. So this Paribhasa Sutra that we see in the Bhagavatam as spoken by Sutta Goswami, it's not viewed equally by all sampradayas as having the same significance in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And for that matter, the Srimad Bhagavatam itself does not hold as much significance in other Vaishnava sampradayas as it does in our Gaudiya sampradaya. Now, Jiva makes very strong arguments as to how it should be seen by all sampradayas as the topmost spiritual praman, scriptural praman, in the context of praman is provided to us where we place our faith in evidentiary faith, primarily that is in scripture, but as we've gone over, we can see praman also coming to us through the guru. So at a certain stage, we may even only accept as evidentiary in our spiritual understanding the statements of our guru. And then he, from his statements, he's going to encourage us to put evidentiary weight in the Shastra. And from there, we learn of the significance of sadhu sangha. So we expand from just the Shastra to Shastra Yukti, or the understandings of Shastra, which are coming from the primary sadhus in our lineage. So Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, these three are our primary evidentiary force. And based upon where we stand in our personal spiritual development, we may put more emphasis on one over another. And the expert spiritual master is quite adept in schooling us as to the proper application of our faith, how we should apply our faith according to our time, our place, our circumstance. And our circumstance, of course, is very much dependent on our personal qualification. So, again, all of this Sandarbha, the Krishna Sandarbha, the fourth of the 6 Sandarbhas, is based primarily on this verse from the very first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Iti chamsa kalapumsa kṛṣṇastu Bhagavan swayam indrari vyakulam lokam mridayanti yuge yuge. So, specifically the one stanza, kṛṣṇastu Bhagavan swayam, of this sloka constitutes the Paribhasa Sutra, or the key to understanding the entirety of all 12 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Again, one of the interpretive forces for Srila Jiva Goswami in his presentation is hermeneutics, and the definition of hermeneutics itself goes beyond just simply the application of rhetorical rules to how we interpret scriptural text, wisdom text, philosophical texts. It goes beyond the rules. It is an art of understanding and an art of communication. And we see this art through the Sanskrit terminology of Jiva Goswami as Shastra Yukti. And as Jiva Goswami stated himself, he sees Shastra Yukti as the supreme praman. How are the Shastras understood, interpreted, and delivered by the sadhus who are adept in their spiritual practice, who are advanced? How do they interpret the scriptures? That is more important than just what we could call a copy and paste of a sloka from here or there to support one or another spiritual conclusion which we may see as being significant. We have to take the whole picture into account. So that requires some real expertise, and that expertise comes through fine discrimination, which is developed in good association. And it comes gradually to us as we advance in our spiritual practice. So we're going on in this 29th Anucheta, wherein Sri Jiva Goswami is supporting the Paribhasa Sutra. And first he supported it in so many ways, and now he's going on to its application. Up to this point, the application was to look at the Paribhasa Sutra in relation to individual statements coming from the Bhagavatam. Now he goes on to a specific narrative in the Bhagavatam and shows the proper application of the Paribhasa Sutra, where one who simply would look at a statement from this episode could take it in a literal meaning, its literal presentation, to mean something more than what it actually does when seen in proper context. And again, seeing in proper context is what we refer to as Shastra Yukti. So Jiva writes in his 29th Anucheta, in this third subsection of the section, as we learned, an Anucheta itself is a section of his treatise dealing with a specific subject. So this is a subsection, and he writes here, in the same way, this declaration, pratijna, kṛṣṇastu Bhagavān svayam, also rules over the episode of Mahakalapura. Moreover, Shastra is educative, and education takes the form of instruction, which is of two types, direct and indirect, or by way of another meaning. Direct instruction has been termed śruti. The meaning of the word direct here is that such instruction is not dependent on anything else. As is said, an independent statement is called śruti. Such being the case, we may refer to Jaimini-sūtra when direct statement, śruti, inferential, mark or word meaning, liṅga, sentence or syntactical connection, vakya, context or interdependence, pakarana, position or order of words, sthana and name, samakhya, are present simultaneously. Each member is progressively weaker in interpretive force because of increasing remoteness from the meaning. So Jiva is schooling us here that when there's a statement in Shastra or a wisdom text, a philosophical text, a direct statement, he's showing all the different kinds of statements that we may see. And those statements have different evidentiary weight. And the topmost evidentiary weight lies in a direct statement, like the statement kṛṣṇas tu Bhagavān svayam. And then an indicative statement, a statement that's indicating something. It's giving an inference, inferential meaning, or the syntax, how the sentence is put together, and the context, where is the sentence at? The word order. When we look at Sanskrit, it's a very precise language, so the position of the words means a lot in the Sanskrit language. And, of course, name. Jiva Goswami continues in this Anucheta, in accordance with this rule of the various levels of interpretive force, the subsequent interpretive criteria is further removed from the correct ascertainment of meaning than the one that precedes it. In other words, śruti's at the top of the list, and it has less interpretive force the further down the list that he just gave us from Jaimini Muni, the less interpretive force it possesses. So, the statement, Krishna, however, is Bhagavan himself, is Sri Sutta's direct statement to Sonika, and it overwrites contradictory instructions conveyed through inferential marks, liṅga, in historical narrations, such as those in Bhagavad Purana and Mahabharata. So the direct statement rules over. Jiva continues, it should not be conjectured that the presiding Lord of Mahakalapura, Mahavishnu, had himself imparted just such a direct instruction to Krishna when he said, and now Jiva quotes from the Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto and the narration that he's unpacking for us and showing how it should be properly seen in context. Specifically, liṅga here. What is the statement that's being made and how should we read it in light of the context of the narrative? Being desirous of seeing the two of you, this is Mahavishnu speaking, Krishna and Arjuna, I had the sons of the Brahmana brought here. You are both my parts, Kala, who have descended upon the earth for the preservation of Dharma. After killing the Asuras, who are a burden to the earth, quickly return here once again to me. So hopefully everyone that's listening to today's presentation of Jiva's Krishna Sandarbha is somewhat familiar with this incident from the 10th canto. Just a quick recap. Krishna is ruling over as a prince the capital and all the citizens in Dwarka. And irrespective of his leadership there, one Brahmana family, year after year, when a child is born to them, that child immediately dies. So the Brahmana, after a few years of this, becomes extremely upset. He can find no fault in himself which would result in such a reaction. He knows his conduct. So therefore, he switches the attention of his remorsefulness in losing this child, his children year after year, to the government leadership. And that happens to be Krishna. He's blaming. He says there must be something wrong with the management of the government. There must be something wrong here, or my sons would not be dying, because I'm a citizen of this community and my sons are dying, and I can't find a fault in my personal conduct, so it must be in the conduct of the leadership. Arjuna hears of this. He puts himself forward as not agreeing. In order to protect the reputation of Krishna, he vows that he will personally protect the next birth of this Brahmanas. To that end, when it's time for the child to be delivered, he goes to their residence. He utilizes all of his powers as a kshatriya. He casts his potency, I believe, in the form of arrows. He protects the whole home. And irrespective of Arjuna's protection, the child dies. So, of course, Arjuna is very distraught, and he personally takes the matter in hand, and he begins to search the universe for the child of the Brahmana, going, of course, first to the planet of death and then to other planetary systems. And unfortunately, he cannot locate this unborn child any place in the material creation. So we can imagine the powers invested in Arjuna to be able to make such a comprehensive exploration of the universal arrangement, looking for this child. So he becomes despondent and he's ready to take his own life in defense of the character of Krishna. Krishna himself intervenes and he says, "No, come with me, let's explore a little further." And Krishna actually takes Arjuna on his transcendental chariot through the universal coverings to the residence of Mahavishnu. And in this narration, Mahavishnu is referred to as Mahakalapura. He's the Lord of that location, the supreme Lord of time, so to speak. And there they find not only this particular child that has just died, but all of the children of the Brahmana. And they were able to return the children and bring great joy to this Brahmana who was living in the kingdom presided over by Krishna. So this incident is related in the Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto, 89th chapter. This and another incident in regards to which of the guna avatars is supreme. But this particular incident, both of them are meant to highlight the transcendental position of Bhagavan Sri Krishna when he advents. Krishna and Arjuna, when they went to Mahavishnu's planet, a narration ensued, and this particular verse is from that narration. And it would appear here that from the statement of Mahavishnu that he's giving spiritual direction. He's saying, first of all, I wanted to see you, and then he's going on to say the purpose of their descent as his part, Kala, is to preserve Dharma. And then he goes on to say, and after you've finished this and relieved the burden of the earth, preserve Dharma, killing the Asuras, then return here to me. So Jiva's unpacking this. He continues. He says, this is not to be interpreted as a direct instruction, because in his, Mahavishnu's request, it is not the intent of this Mahapurana to portray him as a preceptor of absolute reality like Sri Suta Goswami and others, since Sri Krishna is unfailingly omniscient. Since there is no mention of any such prior relation as instructor and instructed between Mahavishnu and Krishna, and since Mahavishnu himself states in the same verse that he has a different motive, being desirous of seeing the two of you, I had the sons of the Brahmana brought here. However, the words used in the Lord of Mahakalapura's directive are closely related to another meaning which will be stated later. So Jiva's saying, look to the incident, put it in proper context. If we put it in context, we can see that Mahavishnu's other statements that followed his initial statement that I was desirous to see you should not be seen as a direct śruti, as a direct statement. There's another meaning there. And now he's going to unpack the meaning and explain to us how we should read it. Jiva continues, then again, we may even consent, saying, let it be so, or may you be thus appeased, and in so doing admit that Sri Krishna is less complete than Mahavishnu. Nonetheless, it will be shown in Anucheta 90 that all the avatars are eternally situated in their own intrinsic forms, in their own respective eternal abodes, accompanied by their own eternal associates. Furthermore, according to the opinion of some others, even though Krishna is himself the Purusha, he has his own independent, separate existence. In light of these considerations, the statements of Mahavishnu, you too are the sages Nara and Narayan, go and adhere to the observance of religious principles, dharma, and quickly return here once again to me will be contradicted. We can see this is a fine art to simply take a scriptural statement or a scriptural narrative, and this narrative itself is occurring in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and looking at it simply as a direct statement, taking its literal meaning of every word that's put forth and not seeing it in context and not seeing it in light of stronger spiritual statements, the young student of the Bhagavat Purana could walk away with the wrong interpretive meaning. Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas are very much about instructing us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas into how to arrive at the proper interpretive meaning when we approach the Srimad Bhagavatam specifically and other scriptures generally in acquiring spiritual knowledge and understanding. Jiva Goswami continues in his Anucheta, setting aside our other arguments. There is no account narrated anywhere at all of Mahavishnu's descent in the particular forms, aṁśa, of Krishna and Arjuna. So there's no support for Krishna and Arjuna being manifestations or aṁśas coming forth from Mahavishnu. There's no support for that. Jiva Goswami continues. Consequently, to propose such a thing would be to introduce the defect of an imagining as common knowledge a notion that is not established anywhere in Scripture. Additionally, in the verses themselves, there is clearly mutual contradiction between the two instructions. One, quickly return here to me, and the other, you too are the sages Nara and Narayan. Go and adhere to the observance of religious principles, Dharma. We, as students of the Bhagavat Purana, as aspiring to walk in the footsteps of the great acharyas and perform some little service to them, really are benefited by this comprehensive unpacking, as Jiva Goswami is presenting in his Sandarbhas, of how to approach Scripture. It is so important. And we can even see in our contemporary discourse that certain devotees will take statements out of context. They will apply a literal interpretation to something that clearly should be seen from a figurative viewpoint. And in this discourse, we're not going to enter into any of those particular situations that are prevalent in our contemporary Gaudiya community, but they are there, and we need to take a very serious notice of the proper application of Shastra Yukti as it's being put forth by Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas. He is the primary force in our sampradaya for understanding scriptural interpretation. For us to be schooled by him, even if we personally don't have the qualification, we don't have the background in Sanskrit, we don't have the background in the various philosophical schools, we're not schooled in all of the different rhetorical standards that he utilizes in putting forth his arguments in support of his statements. Simply to allow ourselves to absorb our consciousness in his presentation is very, very beneficial. Even if all it does is make us humble, it humbles us at the fact that I want to be able to help humanity in some small way. I want to assist my guru in some small way. And how to do that with the dignity and etiquette and humility that makes anything that I may do in their service significant, it really is beneficial. That's all I can come back to. It's so beneficial. If all we walk away from is an utter humility, there's no way that I can convey these meanings. But I can convey the humility of knowing what I don't know. And when I do speak or try to convey what I've heard from my spiritual master and from Scripture, I do it with the utmost respect. Just as we approach Vraj and all the residents there, Pujala Raga, we are very, very respectful. If we maintain that respect towards the Scripture and towards the scriptural arguments that are put there by the masters of Scripture and by the founding acharyas empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, accompanying him from his transcendental abode here to spread Krishna consciousness and give the topmost to human society, Golokare Premadan. It's a magnificent and very humbling position for us to walk away from these kinds of narrations, even if all we walk away with is somewhat being overwhelmed by what's presented. It's all good. It's very good for us. And this study of the Sandarbhas, I have to say, has put me in that position of a student forever, knowing that there's so much that I don't know. Jiva Goswami continues, however, if Krishna and Arjuna were Mahavishnu's aṁśas, then because he witnesses everything in existence at all times as easily as a gem held in his own palm, he would have been able to see them too, even from afar. This, however, is contradicted by his own words. I had the sons of the Brahmana brought here because of my intense desire to see you. It is concluded, therefore, that these two personal forms of Krishna and Arjuna can be seen by Mahavishnu only if and when Sri Krishna himself makes them visible to him. Such being the case, they cannot be Mahavishnu's parts, because the ability to see the two of them was absent in him, whereas the part cannot withhold its perceptibility from the whole. Rather, it is being pointed out that because he has greater power, Sri Krishna is more complete even than Mahavishnu. Such a profound insight that Mahavishnu, he's presiding over all the material manifestation. It's flowing forth from him. Irrespective of his position in that regard, he could not enter into and personally observe Krishna's Praka Leela unless Krishna granted him that vision. His statement alone is evidence to the hierarchy of the various manifestations of the Supreme Lord. And of course, it's evidence in regards to this particular narrative of the distinction between Krishna and Arjuna and that of Mahavishnu. So this statement of him being an aṁśa, despite the direct statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam verse itself, does not hold evidentiary weight when compared in context to the other statements made by Mahavishnu and in the context of the entire narrative of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Jiva continues, even then the blinding of Arjuna's eyes by the effulgence of Mahavishnu and the fear he felt on seeing him are not contradictory, even though Arjuna did not experience such symptoms on seeing Krishna, who, being the whole aṁśa, of which Mahavishnu is but the part, aṁśa, has greater effulgence still. This is due to the fact that Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself manifested only as much potency as was suitable to nourish that particular Leela, while withholding his other potencies even though they were present. Additionally, it is observed that at times even he himself is overcome in battle, even by ordinary human beings. Again, we see here Jiva Goswami is pointing to the significance of prema and how it presides over the Leela in such a way that prema, and in this particular instance, the Sakya prema between Arjuna and Krishna, although Jiva Goswami is not speaking specifically about that, he's indirectly pointing to that as indicative of the fact that Krishna's internal Swarup Shakti, and specifically in relationship to his Leelas, with his Prem Bhaktis being presided over by Yogamaya, his internal potency, we have to see these interactions in relationship with the entirety of the overriding principle of the love between Krishna and his eternal associates, his devotees, and even his sadhikas, that prema rules over in such a way that that love is nourished foremost in all of these interactions. So in this particular interaction, it appears Mahavishnu, his effulgence was so magnificent that Arjuna was blinded by his effulgence. But Jiva Goswami is bringing out the point that Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the supreme manifestation. He's at the top of the hierarchy of Godhead, and Mahavishnu is secondary, so much so that he can't enter into the Leela and even experience it without Krishna's providing an opportunity to him for such an entrance, for such vision of his pastimes, his intimate pastimes, even his Prakat Leela, which is happening within the material universe, presided over by Mahavishnu. So he's hanging out with Krishna as a friend, and Krishna's effulgence isn't blinding him. But in this particular narration, he's being blinded by Mahavishnu's effulgence. So how to see that? And Jiva's schooling us. It has to be seen in this way. You have to take into consideration the entire context. You have to understand the hierarchy. And what are we discussing here? You have to properly apply the key that unlocks the mystery and the secrets of the entire Bhagavat narration. The entire narrative of the Bhagavat Purana has to be approached utilizing the Paribhasa Sutra. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Jiva continues, similarly, in this very episode as well, the apricot horses that had come directly from Vaikuntha lost their way due to material darkness. In identical manner, Sri Krishna's beholding Mahavishnu with reverence should not be regarded as inappropriate, because on other occasions he displayed such reverence towards Sri Rudra, Narada Muni, and others, although they are not on a par with him. In this way, no objection can be raised on the basis of this particular or any other Leela of his, because he is supremely independent in his behavior. How independent? At the Rajasuya sacrifice, he can personally wash the feet of all those that are coming to attend. This is Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, taking on such a humble position, whereas all those that are coming to attend, they should be, as the result of the Rajasuya sacrifice, he was elected as the topmost worshipable personality in the entire assembly. But still, he took on a subordinate position. So similarly, his taking on of subordination is part of the various Leela narratives. They go to enhance his position, not diminish it. They are an ornament to his transcendental character and his transcendental subordination to the love that he exchanges with his devotees. Jiva Goswami does continue. Therefore, the sense derived from the purport and the word meaning of this episode is to be understood exclusively in this manner. In coherence with the pratijna, Krishna stu Bhagavān svayam, the declarative statement, the sense derived from the purport is as follows. So Jiva is really not giving us any room to misunderstand any of this incident. He writes, in the Leela of worshipping Govardhan, Sri Krishna manifested a particular divine form of his for the play of amazing the cowherd people. Although he is Swayam Bhagavan, he himself offered obeisances to himself in that form along with them. Similarly, for the play of amazing Arjuna, he had the sons of the Brahmana stolen through his form of Sri Mahākāla. Along the way to Mahakalapura, he arranged to have Arjuna experience various wonderful things, and on arriving there, he showed him his particular divine form called Mahākāla. Then, along with Arjuna, he offered obeisances to that form of his, and in that same form spoke the aforementioned words to himself, accompanied by Arjuna. In regard to the former episode, Govardhan Puja, the following is said. Accompanied by the residents of Raj, he himself, Sri Krishna, offered obeisances to himself in that form. Also here in the incident of Mahākāla, it is said Bhagavan Achyuta offered obeisances to himself, the unlimited. Therefore, in Harivamsa Purana, while referring to the effulgence surrounding Mahākāla, Sri Krishna himself told Arjuna, "This is my effulgence, which is eternal." Additionally, the sense derived from the words sabda themselves is as follows. Referring to Sri Mahākāla, the adjective purushottamottama has been used. In this compound qualifier, the word purusha refers to the jiva. Superior, uttama, to him is the immanent self, the antaryami or paramatma, who is thus purushottama. Superior, uttama, even to that immanent self, is he who embodies the power of Mahākāla as the effulgence of Bhagavan. So Jiva Goswami is here breaking down the hierarchy of these various manifestations coming forth from Krishna. Krishna is manifesting these different forms for different purposes, and they serve their purposes, but they must be seen according to the proper hierarchy in relationship to Krishna and through the proper application of the Paribhasa, or the key to understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam and the narrations contained therein. We'll finish with a little bit of commentary on this. Further elaboration. Lord Mahākāla, an 8-armed form of Vishnu, reposing on the coils of Seshanaga. So this gives us a visual representation of what this form of Mahavishnu is, where he resides, and it's relayed here that this Mahākāla is an 8-armed form of Vishnu. I've taken some select statements from the commentary. Direct statements are called śruti. They are independent utterances that convey their meaning without any intermediate steps, as is the case with indirect instruction. A direct statement of this sort is supremely powerful and can override any indirect means of interpretation. The hermeneutics of contextual analysis is the subject matter of Jaimini-sūtra, which has been cited in this section. The declaration, kṛṣṇastu Bhagavān svayam, is taken as a śruti statement, direct and unambiguous. The statement of Mahākāla, on the other hand, is not direct. Mahākāla's statement, therefore, should be taken as a liṅga, or inferential mark, and not a śruti. The power of words is called liṅga. A liṅga is always overridden by śruti, because to apply the former, something has to be assumed. In this case, we have to suppose that Mahākāla is specifically the difference between himself as Bhagavān and Krishna as his aṁśa. Such an assumption, however, contradicts the śruti statement and is therefore rejected. So, even in Srimad Bhagavatam, even a statement made by the Lord himself in his manifestation as Mahavishnu can be rejected if it is not a direct statement and if it's seen in a context, even if it appears to be an instruction by the Lord himself in his form as Mahavishnu, it is not accepted. Rather, it is rejected if it contradicts a śruti statement, and specifically in regards to a statement in the Bhagavatam, the statement which is the Paribhasa of the entire presentation. We'll read on in some of the commentary here. One may object that Mahākāla's statement is śruti and not liṅga because it is a direct instruction by him to Krishna. Sri Jiva Goswami counters this argument by pointing out that Krishna is omniscient and hence not in need of any instruction regarding his status. Moreover, he did not travel to Mahākāla as a student to learn about himself. There was no such occasion for instruction. Rather, Mahākāla revealed that he stole the boys out of intense eagerness to see Krishna, the primary objective of the whole incident. In contrast, the statement kṛṣṇastu Bhagavān svayam was made by Sutta Goswami while instructing the sages headed by Sunaka at Namasharanya. It thus represents the final conclusion of a formal teaching about the avatars that was taken up at their own request. There was no such context in the meeting between Krishna and Mahākāla. On the contrary, Mahākāla's longing to see Krishna implies that such was not within his own self-determined will. In other words, it was not his will to instruct Krishna. Rather, his will was to have his darshan, and therefore he arranged the whole incident. We'll conclude here. Sri Jiva Goswami argues further that even if it were admitted that Krishna is an avatar, the implications of such a state of affairs would violate Mahākāla's statement that Krishna and Arjuna are Nara and Narayan, and that they should return to him quickly, where return implies reabsorption into him. This cannot be so, because all the avatars eternally exist in their own intrinsic forms, in their own respective eternal abodes, accompanied by their own eternal associates. If Krishna and Arjuna are Nara and Narayan, and are to be reabsorbed into Mahākāla as his parts, they would no longer be eternally manifest. In this event, the eternal scriptural prescriptions regarding Krishna's worship would become meaningless, as they would relate to an Istadeva who is manifest only temporarily. I will sincerely thank you for your kind association. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, kripasindubhyevacha, patitanam pamadebhyo, vaishnavijya namo namaha. Hare Krishna.
Dhīra dhīra jana priyau प्रियकरौ निर्मासरौ पूजितौ